Ladies and gentlemen, let's gaming Telecom video. Let us discuss Nintendo's finances yet again. We're seeing a decline in the big N's profit margins, and they are basically losing yet more money. It's about a 10% decline year on year. This is pretty much becoming par for the course for Nintendo right now. And so we're going to discuss some of the numbers, and we're also going to discuss the statements and a few opinions and thoughts and stuff like that. So basically, Nintendo has an operating loss of 46.4 billion yen. That's a net loss of 23.2 billion yen. They've shipped 6.17 million consoles. This, as I said, is a full financial year. So just bear that in mind. They sold 32.2 million pieces of software for the Wii U. And the 3DS, meanwhile, is at 43.33 million shipped, and their software is 163 million, just slightly under, but let's just call it 163. And of course, they've also announced a new Pokemon as well. Meanwhile, and this one's more alarming, their cash and equivalents, and this is in dollars, are down from 4.7 billion to 3.4 billion. So, for those of you who are really bad at maths, that's a loss of about 1.3 billion US dollars in just a year. Now, let's discuss this part first, real quick. It's important to realize that this isn't them just simply flushing down money down the toilets. Some of it is to do with investments. Research and development, buildings, blah, blah, blah. So, some of that, great, but still, it means their cash reserves are going down, and there are definite declines in their standard software and everything else that Nintendo relies upon. And they've issued a series of statements in concern to this. And there's not exactly unsurprising, no surprises here type of thing. Basically, there's a lot of PR talk. They're pretty much stating that they're going to maintain and push the console hardware and software business as they already are. They're also going to start introducing Nintendo Network IDs and taking advantage of the smart devices because they believe that it's going to help build a long-term relationship with customers. It also believes that they want to improve people's quality of life, also known as QOL. And so how it's going to do that, other than dedicated video game systems, is to go into health. And it's going to do this with, and I quote, a unique approach of its own. Nintendo are also going to strive to utilize its abundance of character IP by providing its IP with more exposure in other places other than video games. And obviously it's going to rake in profits from the licensing of that. And it wants to pleasantly surprise customers and put a smile on the face of everyone it touches. End quote. So, there is a hell of a lot of marketing spiel in their statement. Obviously, concerning their rather poor financial report, they have to somewhat spin it. And some of these statements have only reinforced what Nintendo have already stated. They want to diversify. They don't want to just rely on gaming, and they know that this has been coming for a while. They've, of course, announced new Pokemon titles, obviously, because they know that that's going to be like a bit of a cash cow for them. And out of curiosity, I decided just to read some opinions on the internet, just kind of look at some comments on various websites and forums, and I was just curious to see how people were taking the news, and I don't think it's going to surprise any of you that it's pretty much everyone took it how you'd expect. People, said, we love Nintendo, most of them, but there were those that were saying, it's third-party support problems, and others that are just flat out blaming Nintendo. And here's the thing, guys, it is somewhat Nintendo's fault. They've made a few really big errors. I think that when the original Wii U specs were announced, people were confused. They said, you know what, the original Wii was an anomaly. We know, it did well, but people wanted more. People wanted a more powerful system, and in the end they got this system that wasn't that powerful, and it was more difficult to design for than what they'd hoped. It's also a completely different architecture, of course, to the next generation systems. It can't run the new engines like, say, the Snowdrop engine or the new Frostbite engine and so on. And so there's going to be difficulty there porting games. And on top of all of this, they wouldn't even be so bad, but I think it's fair to say that Nintendo's own support for the Wii U, particularly in the first 6 to 12 months of its life, haven't been ideal. And I think it's also continuing somewhat to shoot itself in its foot. Okay, so where can we start from this? First of all, one of the definite problems, and you can tell this by looking at the consoles themselves, right? You can exclude the original Wii. But if you were to look at the SNES, the N64, the GameCube, and now the Wii, each of those systems has sold slightly worse than the other. And consider that the video game market, particularly around the time of the PlayStation, exploded. I would say the PS1/PS2 era, definitely the market's expanded a lot. Why? Because of multiple reasons, including people who were old enough to play like the Spectrums and the Atari 2600s and stuff. Let's say at the time they were released, they were like, in the 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and now they were old enough to probably have kids of their own and so on and start introducing them to games. In other words, you were starting to get a lot of second-generation gamers, so to speak, or even third-generation gamers. And because of this, the market started to expand, and the PlayStation appeal also started to kick in. And in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of other people, Nintendo really shot themselves in the foot in this era. Sega screwed themselves over even worse than Nintendo, but Nintendo had a few issues of their own. One of them was sticking to the carts. And what the problem was, why they stuck to carts, is an issue of control. They wanted to limit piracy. There were other benefits of cartridges, including, well, reducing reducing loading times. But the problem was the N64 was a bit difficult to develop for. Its development kits weren't that great. Neither were the Saturns, incidentally, and that was another reason that Sega had problems. And so you got a lot of this early fog. I'm sure you've probably heard the affectionate term N64 fogging, which was pretty synonymous with the N64 on certain games, particularly like Turok 1 and 2, I think. So you had that issue. In addition to that, because it was cartridges and the Saturn and the PlayStation were moving on to discs, the games just didn't have the storage space. I mean, how the hell were you going to put Final Fantasy VII, for example, on the N64? It didn't matter how popular it was, they just couldn't fit all that FMV in. And so you did get ports of games like Quake, or you got ports of games like Resident Evil 2, but you had to really compress the audio and have either worse quality textures, or you had to really either cut out or remove or reduce the quality of cutscenes or whatever, because they just didn't have the space in the cart. It made it more expensive for the customers, because obviously the bigger the cartridge, the more expensive it cost. And so the N64 definitely lost a lot of sales because of that. And because of Nintendo's own protectionism, when it came to that, it ended up costing them fairly dearly. And then, once again, they moved into the GameCube, and it was pretty much the same thing with these proprietary discs. The discs that just weren't large enough to compete with the PlayStation 2 or the Xbox. And there were other issues, of course, with the GameCube as well, but still. But I think the major cause of complaint that a lot of people have with Nintendo is its IPs. Wouldn't you like to not see another Mario for a while? Have a Mario, great. No one's saying that Mario's bad. No one's saying there shouldn't be more Marios. But something else. There's no reason that they couldn't do Star Fox. There's no reason that they couldn't do another Pilot Wings. There's no reason we couldn't be seeing more Metroids in-house. The Metroid Prime was amazing, so why aren't we seeing more of them? And of course there have been other titles after Metroid Prime, but still, nowhere near in the frequency of Mario, and a lot of the reason people kind of rag on Nintendo is simply because of that. People are already saying, we love Nintendo games. This is quotes from a couple of people. We love Nintendo games, but we don't love Nintendo's hardware. Just release it on the PS4 or the PC. And I don't necessarily know if they're there yet. They obviously need to diversify. Another really good revenue stream, and I'm surprised they've not done it, to be honest, is more movies and anime. I don't honestly know where we've not seen more movies and anime from Nintendo. Obviously, we've had certain things like the old Super Mario Bros. Cartoon, the Zelda cartoon, and of course we've had things such as the Mario Bros. Movie, which was so bad it was actually really, really awesome at the same time. But, come on now, you'd kind of expect it to be more. I mean, especially with today's modern graphics and production, it would be pretty cheap for them to make these movies, and they could do kind of serials and stuff, and I think it would actually garner a lot of interest. Nintendo have also screwed themselves over somewhat with the whole Let's Play community by basically saying that, if they detect any gameplay, they're going to pretty much monetize your game and you're not going to get anything for it. Now, I don't get affected by this myself. I don't Let's Play Nintendo stuff. But a lot of channels were pissed at this, really pissed. And what they've done is basically just start cutting out Nintendo content. And when you consider that a lot of these channels were doing things such as playing the game at like the hardest difficulty, trying to beat the game with no lives, or doing other ludicrous challenges, it got a lot of hype onto the games and also brought a lot of memories and started to push the titles into other people. So that's the thing, it's like, I love Nintendo, I love their quality of games, and I do believe they can pull out of this, but these constant net losses aren't good. I want to see a new system for Nintendo, and of course there are these rumours that we're going to be seeing one, but someone brought up, well, it's not even someone, several people have brought up the same question, even before these reports. How can Nintendo, and even I was saying this the other day, how can Nintendo get out of this cycle? They need to make the system easy to develop for. They need to have the system with killer applications at the start. If they have to, they need to be spending money to make the next games some really big exclusive games. If they have to beg, borrow, steal, or kidnap, the developer's dog or something like that, they have to do it. Because they need to give people reasons to buy the system. And by give them reasons, we don't mean, oh, okay, one of my favourite IPs is on this, I guess I'm just going to have to crumble and buy the bloody thing if I want to play it. No, I'm talking give them reasons as in make it fun, learn from the mistakes of the previous system. The problem is right now, the Wii was really popular, so they can go with one of two different directions. Let's ignore the league specifications of their previous, of this system, because right now the league specifications are basically putting their GPU at about 4 T-flops of computing power. That's insane. That's over 2.2 times faster than, well, it's basically 3 times faster than the Xbox One. It's getting into well over double the territory of the PS4. And just to put that into perspective, let's take the Xbox One version, because roughly, and I do mean roughly, if you take 3 Xbox One's GPUs, that would be about the performance of the of Nintendo's supposed next generation leak. So the question is, can games actually really take advantage of that? You've also got to take that into account. I don't think Nintendo needs to necessarily batter the crap out of the opposition in terms of raw technical specs. It would be nice, however, if they did. Let's say they went with a GPU that's about 2.3, 2.4 T-flops. So, and they've got obviously the rest of the specs to kind of match that. So they could say, yes, we've got the most powerful system, but that's not going to do it. They also need to make sure that their SDKs, their development environments, their software, their actual hardware to develop for, all their toolkits, everything is on point. And preferably with a fairly easy to understand system. As much as people might point and laugh at the Xbox One's design decisions at times, the fact of the matter is, for most indie developers, they're easily able to make use of the system. It's not that complicated. The ESRAM is being an issue with certain titles, but it's primarily if you've got multiple render targets or you're rendering at high resolutions with high frame rates, with lots of anti-aliasing and so on. And bottom line is, it is making it harder, but for most developers, they can still work with it. So I think there are multiple different issues Nintendo have. I think they need to push their movies more. I don't know about the rest of the stuff, like the whole medical thing. I'm going to have to see exactly what they're referring to here. But they've got all of these different characters and different IPs they can definitely monetize. They've got all these different options, but the question is, can they actually implement it? I'm really curious to see what you guys think of this one. I certainly don't think Nintendo should throw in the towel, but as I said, with these operating losses, which consistently seem to be coming every single year, it's not exactly good news for them. And remember that when you compare the revenue of like 5.6 billion, that's a 10% decline, while its losses made up for 23.2 billion. That's yen and dollars, by the way. So if you compare that with the previous year, when Nintendo made a profit of about 7.1 billion, it's still maintaining this optimistic. But you've got to remember the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One are pretty much in full swing right now. Obviously, we'll have to see what E3 says, but it's going to be a pretty big E3 for both Microsoft and Sony. I think the gloves are going to be really coming off here, and yeah. Anyway, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.